The topic of this Google Hangout is just sort of in general terms about consumer-directed care. It's something that I have been working with for quite a few years, and we know that in the group there's a lot of discussions about personal care issues and dealing with PAs, etc. So we thought this would be kind of a good introductory conversation. Um, so let me just tell you a little bit about myself and the work that I do, and then I'll give you some just sort of general discussion points about consumer-directed care, and then we can open it up and have a conversation. So when I first went to college in 1983, I went straight from a rehab hospital to a school out in Long Island, and basically back then I was doing consumer directed care, and I didn't even really know that I was doing it. I was hiring other students and then sending them to a regular agency, and they would get enrolled, and then I'd work out the schedule and submit the timesheets. So although I was using a consumer directed, I was doing the work of a consumer directed person. Um, it was still done under the umbrella of an agency, and I did that for 3.5 years. And then when I moved back to the city to finish college, I got put into a regular agency, and there I did a little bit of the consumer directed thing. I found a couple of my own workers, but for the most part, I was relying on the agency. And it really got to the point where they just kept sending people that were afraid to do anything. And I have a trach, so having a PA be able to help me with my trach is really important. And the PAs were not supposed to touch my trach, and so since I lived at the time I was living with my father, it wasn't really a big deal anyway, because my father did most of my trach care. Anyway, um, then when I started working in 1995 at the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled, the PA that was from the agency said to me, "Oh, I can't go to work with you. I'm a home attendant." And so I'm like, "That's ridiculous. I need somebody to help me with the things at work that I would do at home anyway, like, get some food, take off my jacket, put my jacket on, go to the bathroom." And so that was when I started using consumer-directed care. And so basically, the consumer-directed model of care, in a combination between Berkeley and New York City, was really founded in New York City in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. And the company that I use is called Concepts of Independence. They were the first one, they were the first vendor of consumer directed care in New York State, and they're still the biggest vendor throughout the entire state. Um, Currently, I'm actually working for them as their director of policy and outreach. And so, as New York State is moving through the whole process of changing to managed care, they wanted to have somebody who would more visibly represent what consumer directed care is all about. So in some ways, I'm like a lobbyist, but I help develop the internal policies and make it clear to the consumers what their responsibilities are, make it clear to the staff, which is considered the fiscal intermediary, what our responsibilities are to the consumer, and work on the public outreach efforts. In a nutshell, under the consumer directed model, the individuals that use the service um, are responsible for all of their own hiring, training, firing, scheduling, etc. of their care, and then the company or the other entities that work as the fiscal intermediary, they're responsible for paying the personal assistant and cutting the checks and managing the basic benefits package for the workers. Um, anyway, um, I use um, Craigslist for recruiting my workers, um, and I write my own job announcement and describe what I'm trying to do. And I have a job description, which I've sort of tailored for each individual PA, depending on what they. Um, Hi, Galen. Um,
Move mouse up and left 12 inches.
can you hear me, Galen? Can you guys hear me? All right, good. Okay, I wasn't sure. All right, so I was saying that I use Mike. Can you might possibly mute your microphone?
I'm trying to.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Move mouse right.
Anyway, I use Craigslist, as I was saying, for my recruitment. Um, interestingly, about two, about a month ago, I had to let somebody go, and I hadn't hired anybody in like 4 years.
Wow.
So it worked out really well. I ended up running the ad, and within 2 days, I think I had about 30 people that responded,
Sounded right.
and I ended up scheduling, I think, 10 interviews.
Sounded right 6 inches.
Okay, hang on one second, guys.
Move mouse up 3 inches. Move mouse left 1 inch.
Okay,
Move mouse right 3 inches.
this is comical.
Move mouse left 3 inches.
You know, I've known Mike Volkman since I was in college. He's been a pain in the ass
Down 1 inch.
ever since 1984.
Mouse click.
Oh my gosh, he's quiet. Finally. Okay, anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but when I do my interviews, I have a little form that I have them fill it out, and the form has multiple purposes behind it. I want to see kind of their ability to write incomplete sentences. I want to see what their interests are. I see if they can spell or if they can't spell. Um, I ask them what their interests are because I've discovered that people that are athletic or mechanical are pretty good PAs in that they work with their hands and they have good body mechanics, and those people tend to be pretty good in the kitchen. And if you tell them move my hips over just 2 inches, they kind of understand what those types of things are. Um, Also, under the consumer directed program, you're responsible for doing all of your own scheduling. So um, I work with each individual PA, and I try to create like a teamwork approach. I have 4 people right now that work with me, so they each kind of cover for one another. If one person calls in sick or can't make it or is going to be away for a week or so, the other guys, I try to let them know in advance, and then they sort of really make sure that my shifts are covered. And then I have a couple of people that work as backups, and so I'll call them in if my regular team can't cover the shifts. Um, then also under the consumer directed program, you know, unfortunately, you do have to fire people and you do have to supervise, and you got to be kind of tough and let people know what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. In the end, there's really, really, really not any magically correct recipe for making it work. What works for me, what works for other people, it's all going to be a little bit different every time. And so I even find within my team itself, some guys are more, black and white on a piece of paper type of thing, where you really have to give them hands-on instructions that they read, step one, step two, step three, step four, you know. And other people, they have trouble reading anyway, so giving them a handwritten description of something is probably not going to work anyway. So I try to keep it very flexible and tailor it to each individual worker and each individual task um, that I'm asking them to do. And so, in the end, every worker is different, every GIMP is different, every situation is different, and you really just have to kind of experiment. I've been doing this for, I think, 16, 17 years, and I'm still figuring out things and doing things a little bit differently on a day in and day out basis.